Story 1. Story 1, The Whispering Pines. It all started with a craving for solitude. I needed to escape the city's suffocating grip, to reconnect with a primal part of myself I felt was withering. Sequoia National Park seemed like the perfect sanctuary. I envisioned crisp mountain air, the scent of pine needles, and the quiet hum of nature. I packed my gear, told a few friends I'd be off the grid for a few days, and headed east. The ranger at the entrance gate gave me a knowing look when I said I was camping alone. "Be careful out there," she said, her voice strangely low. "Things happen in these woods." I dismissed it as typical park ranger caution. I found a secluded spot nestled deep within a grove of giant sequoias. The towering trees, ancient and stoic, cast long, eerie shadows as the sun dipped below the horizon. Setting up camp was a soothing ritual, the familiar snap of tent poles, the hiss of the camp stove. As darkness enveloped the forest, I built a fire, the crackling flames offering a comforting presence against the encroaching night. Dinner was a simple affair, beans and rice, eaten under a sky dusted with a million stars. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth. This was exactly what I needed. The first unsettling incident occurred around midnight. I woke to a distinct whispering sound, a rustling just outside my tent. Thinking it was an animal, I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent flap. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but trees. I strained my ears, listening intently. The whispering continued, faint but persistent, seeming to emanate from the trees themselves. A shiver ran down my spine. I told myself it was the wind, but the air was still. I zipped up the tent, my heart pounding against my ribs. Sleep eluded me for hours. Every creak of a branch, every rustle of leaves, sent jolts of fear through me. The next morning, I chalked it up to nerves. I hiked to a nearby meadow, marveling at the beauty of the park, trying to shake off the unease from the previous night. But the feeling persisted, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck, as if I was being watched. That night, the whispering returned. It was closer this time, more distinct. I could almost make out words, syllables strung together in a language I didn't understand. Fear gripped me, paralyzing me in my sleeping bag. I held my breath, praying it would stop. It didn't. It grew louder, swirling around my tent, weaving through the trees, a chorus of unseen voices. Then, I saw it. A flickering light, a pale, ethereal glow, moving between the trees. It danced and swayed, drawing closer, closer, until it stopped just outside my tent. I squeezed my eyes shut, burying my face in my sleeping bag. The whispering intensified, morphing into a guttural chanting, a rhythmic pulse that seemed to vibrate the very ground beneath me. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, and a wave of nausea washed over me. The chanting grew louder, closer, until it felt like it was inside my head, inside my very being. I screamed, a primal scream born of pure terror. The chanting stopped. The light vanished. Silence descended upon the forest, a heavy, oppressive silence that was somehow more terrifying than the sounds that preceded it. I lay there, trembling, unsure of what was real and what wasn't. The next morning, I packed up my camp in a frantic rush, throwing everything into my backpack with trembling hands. I didn't look back as I hiked towards the trailhead, my eyes darting nervously from side to side. The forest seemed to press in on me, the trees watching me with silent, knowing eyes. I reached my car, fumbled with the keys, and started the engine. As I drove away, I glanced back at the grove of sequoias, a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. The trees stood silent and still, their shadows stretching long and dark across the forest floor. But I could have sworn, just for a moment, that I heard the whispering again, faint and distant, carried on the wind. Back in the city, the experience felt like a fever dream, a distorted memory from a parallel reality. I tried to rationalize it, to explain it away as a combination of exhaustion and an overactive imagination. But the fear lingered, a cold, unsettling presence that followed me like a shadow. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I hear it again. The whispering. Faint at first, then growing louder, closer. I close my eyes, bury my head under the covers, and pray it will go away. But it doesn't. It's always there, lurking just beneath the surface, a constant reminder of the night I spent alone in the Whispering Pines. And I know, with a chilling certainty, that I am not alone. Something is out there. Something is watching. Waiting. Story 2. Story 2, The Whispering Pines. The crackling campfire cast flickering shadows that danced across the dense pines surrounding my isolated campsite. The scent of burning pine needles mingled with the crisp night air of the Adirondacks, usually a comforting aroma, but tonight it felt oppressive. I'd always loved solo camping, the solitude, the communion with nature. But this trip, something felt off. Another beautiful night, eh, Jake? I'd murmured to myself, trying to shake off the unease. My voice, usually strong and confident, sounded weak, swallowed by the vastness of the woods. I'd driven up from Albany just that afternoon, escaping the city's suffocating routine. Needed some fresh air, some peace. Little did I know. The first sign came subtly, a shift in the rustling of the leaves, a change in the wind's direction that felt unnatural, too sudden. Then, the whispers. Faint at first, barely audible over the crackling fire, like the murmuring of distant voices carried on the wind. I dismissed it as the wind playing tricks, rustling the pine needles. But as the night deepened, so did the whispers. They grew louder, closer, weaving themselves into unsettling phrases, fragmented words I couldn't quite grasp. I grabbed another log from the neatly stacked pile beside my tent, my hand trembling slightly. I told myself it was the cold, but a deeper chill was settling in my bones, a primal fear that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. As I tossed the log onto the fire, the flames flared, momentarily pushing back the shadows, but the whispers persisted, now a constant drone at the periphery of my hearing. The sky, usually a canvas of brilliant stars in these remote mountains, was obscured by a thick, unnatural haze. The moon, a sliver of silver, seemed to pulse with a sickly, pale light. I felt a growing sense of being watched, of being surrounded by something unseen, something malevolent. My heart pounded in my chest like a trapped bird. I started packing, frantically stuffing my gear into my backpack. Logic told me I was being irrational, that it was just the isolation, the darkness playing tricks on my mind. But a deeper, more primal instinct screamed at me to flee, to escape this oppressive, whispering darkness. As I zipped up my tent, a branch snapped behind me. I spun around, adrenaline surging through my veins. Nothing. Just shadows. But the whispers intensified, now laced with a mocking laughter that sent shivers down my spine. I stumbled through the woods, my flashlight beam dancing erratically across the twisted trees. The whispers followed me, clinging to me like cobwebs, weaving a tapestry of fear around me. They spoke of things beyond comprehension, of vast, uncaring entities, of realities that lay just beyond our perception, waiting to break through. I reached my car, fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so violently I could barely insert them into the ignition. The engine roared to life, a welcome sound of civilization in this encroaching wilderness of fear. As I sped down the dirt road, the whispers faded, replaced by a heavy silence that was somehow even more terrifying. I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see something. But there was nothing. Just the dark, oppressive woods, swallowed by the unnatural haze. Yet, I could feel it, a presence watching me, a silent promise of something more to come. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I tried to rationalize the experience, to dismiss it as a hallucination brought on by stress and isolation. But the memory lingered, a festering wound in my mind. The whispers, though fainter, still echoed in the quiet corners of my thoughts. The oppressive feeling of being watched never truly left me. Then, one night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I heard it again. A faint whisper, barely audible, just at the edge of my hearing. It wasn't coming from the outside, not this time. It was coming from inside, from deep within my own mind. A cold dread washed over me as I realized the terrifying truth. It hadn't left. It had just moved in. And as I lay there, paralyzed by fear, the The whisper grew louder, clearer, and I understood, finally, the terrible words it was speaking. Words not of this world, words that spoke of ancient, cosmic horrors, words that promised a future of unimaginable dread. And then, there was silence. A silence more terrifying than any scream, a silence that stretched into an eternity of unknown horror. Waiting. Story 3. Story 3, The Whispering Pines. The crackling fire was my only companion. Pine needles, damp with evening dew, released a sharp, almost metallic scent as I shifted on the log. Big Bear Lake glittered like obsidian under the indifferent gaze of a sliver moon. I'd come here seeking solitude, a break from the city's incessant hum, a chance to reconnect with, I don't know, something. Myself, maybe. Nature. Sanity. Beautiful, isn't it? I jumped, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Old Man Hemlock, a wizened local I'd met earlier at the general store, stood silhouetted against the dying embers of the sunset. He hadn't made a sound approaching. Jesus, Hemlock! You scared me half to death. I clutched my chest, trying to steady my breathing. He chuckled, a dry, rustling sound like leaves skittering across pavement. Sorry, son. Didn't mean to spook YA. Just admiring the view. He gestured towards the lake with a gnarled hand. Quiet tonight, ain't it? Too quiet. I'd noticed it as soon as the sun dipped below the horizon. An unnatural hush had fallen over the woods, silencing the usual chirping of crickets and rustling of leaves. Yeah, quiet, I agreed, a prickle of unease crawling up my spine. Hemlock lingered for a few moments, his eyes, dark and deep-set, seeming to bore into me. Then, with another unsettling chuckle, he turned and melted back into the shadows. Sleep tight, he called back, his voice barely a whisper. I watched him disappear, a knot forming in my stomach. Sleep tight. The phrase echoed in my mind, tinged with an unsettling irony. I knew I wouldn't be sleeping much tonight. Hours crawled by. The fire dwindled to glowing embers, casting flickering shadows that danced and writhed like grotesque puppets on the surrounding trees. The silence, once unsettling, now pressed in on me, heavy and suffocating. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, a rhythmic thumping that seemed to synchronize with the faint, almost imperceptible pulsating coming from the woods. It started subtly. A faint tingling in my fingertips, then a dull ache in my joints. I dismissed it as the chill of the night air. But then the itching began. Deep, agonizing itching under my skin, as if thousands of insects were crawling just beneath the surface. I scratched at my arms, my legs, my chest, but the itching only intensified. I shone my flashlight on my skin, half expecting to see something wriggling beneath the surface. There was nothing. But the skin on my forearms looked different. Puffy, almost swollen, and marked with a network of thin, purplish veins that hadn't been there before. Panic began to claw at the edges of my reason. I felt a growing sense of detachment from my own body, as if it was no longer entirely mine. The pulsating from the woods grew stronger, accompanied by a low, guttural humming that vibrated deep within my chest. Suddenly, a twig snapped. Close. Very close. I spun around, flashlight beam darting nervously through the trees. Nothing. Just the whispering pines, their branches swaying rhythmically in the non-existent breeze. Hello? My voice cracked, thin and reedy. No response. But I knew something was out there. Watching me. Waiting. The itching intensified, spreading to my face, my neck, my scalp. I clawed at my skin, drawing blood. My reflection in the polished surface of my canteen looked back at me with wide, unseeing eyes. My face was bloated, distorted, the skin stretched taut and glistening, the veins beneath pulsing with an unnatural luminescence. I didn't recognize myself. The humming grew louder, closer, resonating deep within my bones. I could feel the ground vibrating beneath my feet. And then, through the trees, I saw it. A faint, ethereal glow, pulsing in time with the humming. It was moving towards me. Slowly, deliberately. Terror seized me, paralyzing me in place. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't respond. The itching had become unbearable, a searing, agonizing pain that consumed my every thought. My skin felt like it was about to split open. The glow grew brighter, revealing a shape, a form, something that defied description. It wasn't human, not animal, not anything I had ever seen before. It was a pulsating mass of light and shadow, constantly shifting and reforming, its edges blurring into the surrounding darkness. As it approached, the humming intensified, morphing into a chorus of whispers, too low to decipher, yet somehow understood. They spoke of change, of transformation, of becoming something else. The whispers burrowed into my mind, twisting my thoughts, reshaping my perceptions. The itching became a burning, searing pain that spread throughout my body, consuming me from the inside out. My bones felt like they were melting, reforming, reshaping themselves into something new. The glowing form was almost upon me. I could feel its presence, its power, its hunger. My vision blurred, my senses overwhelmed. I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that I was about to become part of something vast, something ancient, something other. The last thing I remember is the whispers, growing louder, more insistent, more welcoming. And then, darkness. I don't know how long I was gone. When I woke up, the sun was rising, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The woods were silent, the humming gone. The itching had subsided, leaving behind a dull ache and a lingering sense of wrongness. I looked at my hands. They looked normal. But I knew, deep down, that something had changed. Something fundamental. Something irrevocable. I packed up my camp, my movement stiff and awkward. As I walked away, I glanced back at the whispering pines. They stood silent, indifferent, their branches swaying gently in the morning breeze. But I could still feel it. Watching me. Waiting. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I would be back.